Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I am Gringo Christopher. That's what they say. Usually in Thailand. So I go there all the time. They got great water slides. I was just there yesterday, speaking of, with the YouTube gathering. We went there. Truthfully, we were Bigfoot hunting. It was a small contingent of us. It was about 675 million, and we didn't find any, but we were getting drunk, and we were throwing Bigfoot spears all over the place. We lost a lot of good people that day, but we all move on. We mourn in our own ways. With that said, this is not a request, but since I did the Fran 55 Kandahar Giant and Navy SEAL goes rogue, Navy SEAL, yes, this was right with it. It said U.S. Marine witnessed paranormal event in Afghanistan, Observation Post Rock. So I just thought, well, this was kind of with it. I might as well just do this one too. 22 minutes, we'll see what happens. That was me. I burped. I apologize. You have to like and subscribe to the channel. Otherwise, that's all you're going to have. It mutes on you. My dog sneezed. Bless you. Don't look at me. And if you don't like and subscribe, then all you're going to hear is sneezes and burps instead of the voice. My dogs are kind of near me, but they're not. It's their time. They've synced. They're sisters, so they're kind of. I'm not bothering them. I'm leaving them alone. You know, they're taking Midol and they're just relaxing. They're saying, "Oh gosh, when is this just gonna end?" I'm like, I don't know. So I'm not going to get into this any further. We're just going to go ahead and start the video and see what this one's all about.
In the military, despite what anybody tells you, it's just not something that gets discussed. Now, I was a bit of an anomaly. I was in the Navy for 7 years. 5 of those years were spent on a SEAL team, and maybe because we were in such small teams, people had to put up with my weirdness and my interest in, the strange happenings around the world. But, really that was an anomaly. And I think it comes from the culture inside the military where you have a group of people that has such a intense job that's so rooted on practical approaches to problem solving. There is no time to be theorizing about how demons and ghosts and things that are out of this world are having an impact, because we need to focus on what's happening right now in front of us. There's no space for anything else. And so when you do hear stories coming out of the military that are paranormal in nature, it isn't that you should inherently believe them, but rather you should understand that if they have come to the conclusion that this is paranormal, they have ruled out virtually everything else. And so today I'm going to share a military paranormal story that happened in Afghanistan in 2009 when 8 U.S. Marines were stationed at this very isolated observation post in the middle of Helmand province. And some very strange things happened out there that the Marines that were there believe are still plaguing them to this day. But before we get into today's story, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, you've come to the right channel, because that's all I do, and I upload 3, 4, even 5 times every week. So if that's of interest to you, I would encourage you to play Ding Dong Ditch on the like button's house, and then also subscribe to this channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of my weekly uploads. All right, let's get into today's story.
My band, we're coming to Hawaii now, playing this song. I do it on the harmonica.
In June of 2009, U.S. and NATO forces surged into Afghanistan. Troop numbers escalated dramatically in preparation for this massive offensive against the Taliban. During this surge, a very small team of...
By the way, I realized I lean into the camera to talk, and the microphone's down here. So all I have to do is pick it up. Hey, my band, we're playing the Mrballen theme song. in Hawaii. Thanks, Portland. You guys rocked. It was 700,000 .2 of you. We shut the building down. Literally, we set it on fire when we were gone. So, can't ever host that again. I don't know what happened. Let's just play this video.
Marines, 8 Marines, were given a mission to go to an observation post in Helmand province where a group of British soldiers were stationed at the time. An observation post, or OP as it's called in the military, is any location where you're able to observe, hence the name. Most OPs, if not all OPs, are located on high ground because that provides you the best view. OPs are very strategically valuable. You have the higher ground and you can see what's going on around you. And so as a result, OPs become prime targets for attack. Now, the OP that these Marines were going to, OP Rock, was a little bit unique. It was strategically very important, but it didn't really have the higher ground. All around it were other large pieces of terrain, which meant if you poke your head up for too long, you might get shot from a sniper on the mountain. And so OP Rock was like a very dangerous and isolated place to be. Not to mention laughably small and had almost no amenities. It was basically a couple of HESCO barriers, those big brown squares that get filled with sand and dirt to stop bullets, and then, not even cots. They slept literally on the ground on sleeping pads and a couple of ghillie tents overhead. That was about it. And so these Marines were going to be there for 60 days, where they were not going to be able to go anywhere. They were just isolated and stuck on this tiny little wasteland in the middle of Afghanistan. The 8 Marines were led by Sergeant Green, and his second in command was Corporal Lena. The other 6 junior Marines were Zolik, Hoyt, Wilson, Parker, Smith, and Gibbs. After driving their up-armored vehicles all the way through the snaking pass, they get to OP Rock, and the British soldiers are there anxiously waiting for them. Normally, anytime you turn over with any other unit, you do something called turnover operations, where because you're new to the area, you want to go out and do like a presence patrol or something to get a feel for the area with the people who have been there, to kind of give you a lay of the land and say, hey, look out for this area. We think there's IEDs over there. Remember, if you're over here, you're in plain sight of the enemy. They can shoot you. But when they got there, the British were so anxious to leave. They did not do turnover ops. The British just looked totally weathered and beaten down and ragged, like they'd been fighting at OP Rock for decades. But they'd only been there for 60 days, the same amount of time that these Marines are about to be there. And before they leave, one of the British soldiers turns and says, hey, just so you know, if you dig anything up here, just put it back. And the Marines look at him like, what are you talking about? And he doesn't elaborate. He just says again, if you dig anything up, just put it back. Trust me. So that night, the men have settled into their new home for the next 60 days. And the way it works on any base in the world, but certainly in a war zone, is there's always someone manning a guard post. And so the first night, it happened to be Corporal Lena's turn to be on watch. Corporal Lena is the second in command of these 8 Marines. And he was up in the guard tower, and you got to put yourself in his mind, okay? Even if you've never been to Afghanistan, just imagine being out in the middle of nowhere, like in the middle of a mountainous desert with no village, no people, no anything. But at the same time, you are hanging it out there.
That's how it is here in the Midwest. Nothing but mountains.
You are totally exposed. There are people in the mountains around you that want to kill you, for sure. And it's you and 7 other sleeping people right in your little tiny OP. All you got is a radio where you can call back to your main base that's far enough away that if something bad happened, you better hope that 1, you can get through to them, and 2, they can get over here as quickly as they can. And the great fear when you're in these remote locations is that you're going to get ambushed. There's so many stories about these complex attacks being launched on these small little outposts where all of a sudden groups like these 8 Marines just get totally overrun by the Taliban. So it's a terrifying thing. When I was in Afghanistan, I didn't stand all that much guard duty, but when I did, you're up in the shack and you're kind of looking out into this like vast expanse of kind of nothingness. And you're wondering, like, are people watching me right now? Is someone taking aim at me right now? I mean, you're protected and you're doing all the things you're supposed to do, but nighttime in Afghanistan, standing guard duty, it's very eerie. And so this first night, Lena is up there, it's very quiet, and his radio that's right next to him, like imagine like a big walkie-talkie, right? Military grade radio. It starts crackling. Military radios, at least American military radios, are from the 1950s, and they have basically not changed. They're very durable and they work, but it's not uncommon for them to falter, and that's why we have people that specialize in just radios that can fix these things for us. Because if you lose your line of communication, you're screwed. And so he's sitting there and he starts hearing crackling on the radio. And so he notices it, but he doesn't think much of it. And the crackling stops, and he's looking out into the mountainside, and he's kind of looking around and just doing his typical guard duty. Then the crackling picks up again, and he thinks he can hear someone speaking in the radio. It didn't sound like English. It didn't sound like even words necessarily, but it was a little bit louder. Now he's really paying attention to it. Because he was worried his radio might be going bad, he first took the battery off, looked at it, blew it off, reconnected the battery, rebooted it, and put it back down, and he's a little more keyed into his radio. And then a couple minutes later, he hears this crackling, and now he can clearly hear someone's voice. And it sounds like Russian. He thinks someone is speaking in Russian. This is an encrypted radio. You're not picking up random signals all over the place. You only are picking up people that have your crypto. And it doesn't make any sense to pick up somebody else's voice. This has to be someone on your team. And so he thinks, okay, I'll check in with the main base, because my guys are all asleep right here. They're all sleeping right there, 7 of them. There's no beds. They're laying on the ground right there. I can count them. No one's on the radio. So he picks up the radio and he calls into the main base and he says, hey, is anybody pushing traffic out this way to OP Rock? And like right away, they get a response from the main base that says, no, we're not pushing or receiving traffic. Lena's not terrified about this, but he's like, okay, there's something going on with the radio. The crackling and gurgling and weird sounds would persist throughout the night, to the point where the next morning when the next guard came on duty, he said, hey, I think there's something strange going on with the radio. You should probably go switch it out and get somebody else's radio while you're up here. Lena's relieved of guard duty, and he goes down to check on the other Marines. And at this point, everybody's awake, and it's the start of their first full day at OP Rock. And because they have nothing else to do besides defend it, they start taking stock of how well fortified is it, what are some ways that we can improve this place, and they notice that there's a trench dug around the inside of OP Rock, basically right up against the Heskos, that allows anyone to stand and not be jutting out of the OP and run the risk of getting shot by a sniper. And they're looking at it and they're thinking to themselves, it's not deep enough. It's maybe a couple feet down. You're certainly not going to be able to stand on this trench. You'll totally be exposed. And they thought, why didn't the British, who were here for 60 days, why didn't they dig a deeper trench? And so Lena and the rest of the Marines decide they're going to spend that day digging the trench a little bit deeper and a little bit wider. As they're digging, Lena hits something metal in the trench. And he pulls it out, and it's like this metal stake, like an engineering stake. And he brushes off the dirt on the stake, and he's looking at it, and he can see some foreign writing, and it looks like Russian writing. And he's thinking to himself, oh, that's not that weird. Back in the 80s, the Russians were here, and it's totally possible that they may have left some of their gear here and it got buried. About 10 meters away from Lena is one of the younger Marines named Wilson, who's digging, and at some point he hits the ground and like a pocket in the soil opens up. And he sees there's some pottery and some pieces of what look like ceramics that are inside of this hole. And after pulling out some of the plates and pots, they pull out a huge human bone, a femur, your leg bone. They ultimately decide to tuck the leg bone back into where it was, and they stop digging in that area, and they continue to dig in the other sections of the trench. But they couldn't dig more than a couple inches before running into more human remains. And by the end of the day, they had unearthed dozens of skeletons inside of this trench. And so they realized that this is probably what the British meant when they said, if you dig something up, put it back. A couple of weeks go by, and the Marines at this point have accepted that they live in a very creepy place. And on day 13 of being at OP Rock, Hoyt, who had just turned 20 years old, is up on guard duty. As he's sitting there, he starts getting this really uncomfortable feeling that someone is right behind him. And so at one point, he turns around to look at what's behind him, basically looking back into the camp itself. And now, coming from outside the wire where he had just been looking, he hears this horrible, blood-curdling scream. He turns around and he's looking out. He's got his night vision goggles on. He's looking around for anything. And all of a sudden, a couple hundred meters away, he sees a man running between one bush to another bush. Now, they know that at any time they could get attacked. So they're not thinking that this could be anything other than the Taliban coming to attack them. And so the other Marines have jumped up because they heard the scream, and they're looking to Hoyt to be like, what's going on? Hoyt is saying to them, I got a guy, he's about 200 meters away. I just saw him running right to left. Lena runs over to the edge of the HESCO, and he raises his rifle with a thermal imager on it, and he's looking out, and there's no heat signature out there. It's totally cold. There's no animals, there's no people, certainly, there's nothing. And Lena is yelling to Hoyt, where is he? Where do I need to look? And Hoyt's saying, he's right there. I just
The hell was it, a ghost?
saw him go behind that bush. But Lena is looking out, and he can't see anything on thermal. And he's like, I don't see anything. There's no one out there. The Marines also had a dog that they inherited from the British soldiers that had been there. Her name was Ugly Betty. They loved Ugly Betty. They took care of her, and she was apparently really good at identifying when people were coming towards the OP. So she was a great watchdog. And this whole time, she had been looking in the same direction that Hoyt had seen this figure, and she is barking like a maniac. And even after they're looking...
Sorry, I had to move the feet of this chair, of the table. Sorry.
with thermal and they can't see anyone out there, they can't get Betty to calm down. She's completely transfixed on the area where Hoyt had seen this figure. So for the rest of the night, the Marines are totally on guard, anticipating at any moment that they're going to get attacked. Someone's going to take a shot, they're going to throw a grenade in, because we lost this guy who was right there in front of us. So eventually, the next day, when they didn't get attacked, they just kind of said, okay, and they moved on and just figured it was an anomaly. Another couple of weeks later, on day 26, Zolik, who's another one of the younger Marines, was on guard duty, and it was really hot. He remembers even taking his helmet off because he was sweating so bad. And then at some point, while he's just looking out into the vast open nothingness, he said that the temperature dropped inside of the shack dramatically. So much so that he actually felt cold. There was no breeze, there was no reason for it to be getting cold. And as he's thinking to himself, like, is there a storm coming in or a cold front coming in? He starts feeling like someone's standing behind him. And he keeps looking over his shoulder and no one's there. He's in this tiny little shack. And he's feeling creeped out, and all of a sudden he starts hearing whispering from behind him. Not on the radio, but like in the shack with him. And he keeps turning around and he keeps thinking, like, am I hearing things? Am I losing my mind? And he starts hearing footsteps on the roof of his shack. And that's when he thinks, oh, Smith, who was the kind of class clown of the group, is playing a joke on me. He must be whispering outside. I bet he climbed up on top and he's screwing with me. So he jumps out of the shack and looks up, expecting to see Smith standing on the roof of the guard shack. But no one's on the guard shack. At this point, Zolik's pretty spooked. He does a quick search on either side of the guard shack, thinking maybe Smith is there, but no one's there. And then he turns around and, of course, sees that the other 7 Marines are all asleep. So it wasn't Smith. It wasn't any of his teammates. At this point, he goes back in the shack and he raises his rifle and he's looking through his thermal scope. So any human would light up like a Christmas tree if you saw them on a thermal. And he's scanning outside all around, thinking, did I hear someone who's out there? Because they had that weird run-in 2 weeks earlier with that random person that they could never find. He's thinking maybe there's somebody else out here. And as he's scanning, he sees a man.
If there's somebody else out there, nobody is going to have jumped into that post and ran on your shack and then took off running.
And standing a couple hundred meters away with his fists raised like this. Zolik was so caught off guard from the way he was standing that he actually lowered his rifle to look, because the moon was pretty bright, the illumination was pretty good, and he looked, he couldn't really see him again, so he brought his rifle back up, and now through his thermal the figure was gone. Zolik in interviews has admitted that he was really stressed out about being at OP Rock. He was really down. I think of all the Marines there, he was depressed. He did not want to be there. He felt like he was experiencing real combat fatigue. And he thought at this moment that he's losing his mind. Between the whispering and the footsteps on the roof and seeing this person with his fist raised. And so instead of telling people that he had potentially just seen this person out along the perimeter of their OP, he started to convince himself that you're just losing your mind. You're stressed and you're hallucinating. You just got to calm down. For the rest of the night, he would not see the figure on his thermal or anybody out there, but he would hear whispering behind him. He kept hearing footsteps on the roof, but he would go out and no one would be there. So by the time the sun came up, he really thought that he was kind of losing his mind. And so he went to his leadership, Sergeant Green and Corporal Lena, and he told them about what had happened the night before, about, seeing the figure that had disappeared and hearing these whispers and the footsteps. I mean, he really thought that he was losing it, and he requested to be transferred. And they granted it to him. And the other 7 Marines were really upset about that. They felt like he was kind of abandoning them, and they were really critical of the reason for him leaving. They're like, oh, you're just playing the crazy card. You're just making that up so you can leave this crappy place that we don't want to be here either. So they were not taking seriously what he claimed happened. They just believed he was using the crazy card.
That's fair. I can understand why they'd be mad, but at the same time, you're not in that situation, and being in that situation would probably really freak you out, because you can deal with the Taliban, but this, you don't know what you're dealing with. But to have found all those bones instantly,
to get out of being at OP Rock. Just a couple of days after Zolik's departure, Lena is on guard duty in that guard shack, and as he's looking out, Ugly Betty starts barking really aggressively towards the area that Lena is looking at. And so he raises his night vision goggles and he's scanning the mountainside looking for any sign of people that perhaps Ugly Betty has sensed. And he stops when he sees what he believes is a Taliban scout standing on the mountainside, who's pretty far away, a few hundred meters away, and he switches to his thermal scope to confirm that it's a person before he engages. And when he raises his thermal scope, there's nobody there. There's no heat signature anywhere. But Ugly Betty is still barking like a maniac in the direction of where this potential scout was standing. And so Lena goes back to his night vision goggles a second later, and he's looking, and he sees the same scout, now about 100 meters closer to him, way closer to him. Impossible to cover that distance in that amount of time. He practically falls over when he sees it. He switches to his thermal and he's getting ready to engage, but there's nothing there. And this is all happening in a matter of seconds. He goes back to his NVGs and he's looking, and there's nothing there. And as he's about to go to his thermal for one last look, he feels a tap on his shoulder, which he believes is going to be one of the other Marines that must have heard him frantically moving around in the guard shack. And when he turns, there's no one there. There's no one anywhere near the shack. All 7 are asleep in the middle of the camp. At this point, Lena felt bad because he was critical of Zolik, who had left because he had heard voices and seen apparitions out in the distance. And here's Lena, the second in command of the group, having the exact same experience. But over the next 10 days, Hoyt, Smith, and Wilson would all have very similar experiences in that guard shack. And after a while, they all began sharing their stories, and they all realized that Zolik probably wasn't lying, and we were unfair to be critical of him because we've all experienced this now. Then on day 59, the day before they're scheduled to leave, all of their radios go dead. All of them.
Oh.
And Lena goes over to Gibbs, who was their comms guy, and he's like, what's going on? And Gibbs was like, I've been working on the radios this whole time we're here. I've changed nothing. They've always worked. Now, they did have a satellite phone, but it was an unreliable way to get in touch with reinforcements if you really needed it. They're pretty much isolated at this point, and they're all just sitting there, just hoping they can get through one more night without any problems. Wilson is the one actually in the guard shack, and then all of a sudden, machine gun fire opens up right outside of their base. And Wilson is totally caught off guard. He has no idea where it's coming from. He's trying to call it out to the guys where they're getting shot from. And all the other Marines are scrambling to the walls. They're taking cover behind the Hescos. And as they're laying there, Lena runs up into the guard shack with Wilson. He's like, he grabs him and he's like, where are they shooting us from? And Wilson's like, I have no idea. And it's like, it's so loud. There's all this gunfire coming in at them. And as Lena and Wilson are trying to figure out where this is coming from, they hear the distinctive sound of an RPG being fired at them. It's a rocket-propelled grenade. It's like a whistling sound, and they know it's going to hit them at any moment. The two of them brace for impact, and they hear the sound of this RPG smashing on the side of the OP, and the machine gun fire is just continuing. It's a non-stop. And so a couple of the other younger Marines basically low-crawled their way into the trench where they were protected from these rounds, and they're thinking, like, we got to make sure no one's in the trenches. And so they start clearing the trenches, but no one's in the trench. And it's just this constant barrage of gunfire. They have no idea where it's coming from. And then just as suddenly as it started, the gunfire stops and it's silent. As soon as the shooting stopped, the Marines did not just poke their head up and say everything's fine now. If you're being shot at, you assume that even if there's a break in the gunfire, they're going to start shooting at you again. And so for hours, they're just like waiting for the next round of fire to start, but they don't even know where it's coming from.
They're probably waiting to see, are they going to poke their heads up and look around to find out where it came from? And then as soon as that happens, you know, round two.
And they're kind of isolated and exposed, so they're all just kind of like hunkered down against the HESC codes waiting to respond to the next volley of fire. But it never comes. And when the sun comes up, they're able to take stock of the damage to their OP from all the machine gun fire and from the rocket-propelled grenade. But there's no damage. No one had ever been shooting at the OP. There was no damage. So they had no explanation for it. So when reinforcements arrived, they just wanted to pack their stuff up and get the heck out of there. And they did. After leaving OP Rock, very shortly after, Smith, Parker, and Diggs, 3 of the 8 Marines that were there, were all killed in Afghanistan in separate instances. And then Sergeant Green, who was their leader, was very badly injured in an IED blast. Lena believes that when they were digging out those trenches and finding all those bones, that they unleashed something. It turned out a lot of people had lost their lives on that little strip of rock. When the Russians invaded Afghanistan, they captured OP Rock and killed all of the Mujahideen that were located at OP Rock. Then the Taliban came in and they took back OP Rock from the Russians and killed all the Russians that were at OP Rock. Then Americans came in and took back OP Rock from the Taliban, killing all the Taliban that were there. So you have all these people, probably dozens and dozens of people that at one point have been holding OP Rock that had all been killed at OP Rock. And so Lena believes that it's only a matter of time before this curse that they unleashed comes back to get him. So I'd love to get your reaction. What do you think happened at OP Rock?
OP Rock is not a very big spot with a lot of death, you know, and they'll... whether you believe in hauntings or not, they always say that, you know, places are haunted when there's a lot of sadness or death or things like that. And if you're talking about just that little area and how much death has happened there and how much bad things have happened there, and then burying the bodies, they probably weren't given a very good funeral. And then you're mixing and matching just all these things together. Yeah, it's probably not good at all. And you know, you don't know the situation of the land around it, the people who used to live on it, maybe people who currently do, not necessarily during the war, but how many people have died there. I mean, that whole place is just... getting a drink. That whole place is not pleasant. You know, to put it kindly. And there's just a lot of death there, especially, you know, that rock. Wow. Well, I'm gonna end this here. I appreciate the watch, like and subscribe to the channel for the algorithm and all that stuff. I need the monies. I'm gonna open up a thing where you guys just give me monies. For the standard of living that I have grown to be accustomed to, I'm going to need at least $1 million a day. And I'm also going to need a separate one to cover the taxes for this living expenses and style that I have grown accustomed to. I will accept, I don't know, maybe drop it down to like, I don't know, $100,000 a month. I will try my best to be happy with that. That'd be crazy. I'm demanding you like me, so you have to pay for me to live properly. What a dick. Anyways, I'm gonna end this here because I've got to do some laundry and I want a pizza. I want some pizza, so I'm gonna go get some pizza. Papa gonna get some pizza. I truly do appreciate everyone, you know, the comments and the views and all that stuff. It's crazy to go through. If anyone has a channel and you put out your videos, I don't have my phone near me, but you can get the YouTube analytics thing, and it's just so cool. I get this thing that tells me like all the viewers who are subscribed to my channel, the usual times that what am I trying to say? The usual times, like 24 hours on Sunday or Saturday all the way to Sunday, and all through the week, and you know, the times that people see my videos, it's really interesting. And then the age groups, male, female, subtitles. It's funny, and I'm not trying to encourage this, so please, you know, knocking on wood just to say this, but the Mrballen videos that I've done, he has gotten it was something like 76.7 or 77.3, some 76 and 77% thumbs up on the videos. So it means he's gotten, you know, 3 thumbs up to every dislike, right, on my videos. And I appreciate this. I'm 100% likes. I mean, it's not my content, so really you shouldn't be disliking the content. It's just me, and I don't edit it. I don't put these thumbnails out there because this isn't my content. I don't want my thumbnail on there. You know, I did it at first because I was trying to learn how to do it, but then I realized it's not mine. If it was truly my stuff, then I would do everything I could to make it look nice. And I'm not saying it doesn't look nice, but this isn't mine. So I'm not trying to take credit for it. So if you've ever been curious about the thumbnail thing, this isn't mine, and I know all these other people spend time doing all that. It's just not me. I'm going to end this now because I want to get a pizza. It's 5:04 p.m. and I've got to do some laundry and get a pizza, and I want to relax because I've got one more Saturday to work. I probably got another 40 plus hours coming up. A couple days after work I got to do some things, so I'm trying to relax when I can. And right now, for the last 5 or 6 weeks, my relaxation has just been Sundays, but I end up doing videos, and I'm not complaining. I end up doing videos, and so I don't really get to relax like I want to, because usually my Sundays are video games, and I only get off the couch to use the bathroom and get food. That's it. And I do laundry. I don't even want to walk. But the weather's going to start to get nice. I'll be moving my, I'm going to call it a studio. It's not. It's a table with my computer on it. I'm going to be moving into another room later on. I don't know. It could be 2 weeks. It could be 6 weeks. I'm going to be moving it in. And I'm going to have my bookshelf behind me. And maybe I'll have a different little thing that I've picked up, little trinket that I've picked up along the way in all the places that I've visited and stuff like that. I've got some really cool little things. But, you know, whatever. I was also thinking about, which I won't do until I get more people, but I thought about doing one of those live streams, like on one night, and just to, I could answer questions, or just to go over my interests and stuff that I have, places that I visited, historical sites and stuff like that. And I could get up on my computer, because I have a bunch of photos to a bunch of places I've been to. Some I want to go back and take more pictures. Some places I visited during COVID and I wasn't able to get into certain spots and whatever. Williamsburg in particular. This has nothing to do with the video, and I'm just rambling that. But I'm just, I ramble. I apologize. I'm going to end this here. Have a good day. Have a good night. Whatever it is, just make sure you have a good one. Pizza time. Goodbye.